Yes.
Good morning.
If somebody wants to hit the broadcast button on their screen,
I'll just do that.
And that'll make us live.
Yep, we're good.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us on this third day of Charcha 2020, online convening, largest of its kind dialogue between the development sector. So it's been 2 days of wonderful discussions on a variety of topics, and within the fundraising and philanthropy track, which we've been focused on, we've talked a lot about what investors, funders, philanthropists, NGOs can do to address this crisis that we're all facing. And today we're really going to focus on the role of the government, and specifically how civil society and NGOs can effectively partner with the government. That is really essential for service delivery, and this new normal pretty much requires that sort of collaboration. So this is what this panel discussion is about. We're very, very fortunate. We've got a fantastic panel with us of 5 leading experts who are experts in this topic. And what I'm going to do is, rather than frame the discussion too much, I think it's a topic that all of the NGOs certainly appreciate, and now the government also appreciates. We've got 2 representatives here from civil society as well, who have directly been working with governments and partnering with NGOs. So what I would like to do, with your permission, is to sort of go one by one and request each of our 5 panelists here to share perspectives on what their organization has been doing and how do they really answer this this critical question of how does government leverage A, the capacity, and B, the delivery models of the NGOs, both for short-term relief, whether it's food, shelter, cash, or medium to long-term service delivery, and of course to the most vulnerable and affected segments of the society. So we'll start first with Sudha. Welcome, Sudha. And Sudha is, of course, the CEO of the Nudge Foundation, and or rather the Nudge Center for Social Innovation, who are one of the organizers, the main organizer of this conference. So thank you for catalyzing all of this. Sudha has been leading NCORE and related initiatives to attract and develop top talent working on problems of poverty. She has worked in the technology sector for 16 years in various leadership roles, spanning operations, engineering, and organizational development, but always had a passion to scale up social development and been attracted to the sector. She's an engineer and an MBA from IIM Lucknow. And with that, Sudha, I'd like to hand it over to you and specifically ask you to focus on this issue of, given all the work that you guys do with NGOs, what are the best examples of innovations from the private sector, right, that can improve public systems? And at this time, when the funding from the private sources is drying up, CSR is getting reduced, where is this disruption going to come from? So would love to hear your perspectives, Sudha, on the role of civil society and examples that have worked and not worked.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Karthik, for setting the stage, and real honor and pleasure to be here. I struggled with the framing of this a little bit. Because yes, I think civil society has jumped in a very big way by way of emergency response and relief activity in the wake of COVID, and that has been appreciated by the government a lot. This is very powerful. It happens at scale, but not because there are institutions with capacity for service delivery, but because Indian civil society has a certain ethos and core values of service. Regular citizens step up when there is a crisis, and it can be a COVID crisis or the Kerala floods or a funny cyclone, whatever natural or man-made disaster it is. These values come to fore and very quickly get activated. Just in the past few weeks, we've seen COVID heroes like Khushru Pocha, who runs Seva Kitchen in Pune and jumped in to distribute meals, went without going to sleep for 5 days, I hear. And then we saw startups figure out how to distribute PPEs and do sanitation training on the fly. The reason this works every time is because there's a distributed ability to solve problems at a very local level through motivated people who have the agency to act. And it manifests in a very positive way every time. But there's a different kind of emergency that's not quite the same. It's not about the drowning child, but about the underfed child, the child who's not learning sufficiently at school, or will grow up without gender sensitization or life skills to be self-reliant in the 21st century. It isn't quite as dramatic as a drowning child where you can quickly roll up your sleeves and jump into the river. But this child also needs solutions with the same urgency because for them, the clock is ticking. There's a point beyond which any help will be too late. That threshold is 5 years when it comes to nutrition. As we all know, stunting and wasting cannot be reversed beyond that point. And similarly, there are thresholds in learning and substance abuse beyond which you cannot help that person. So it is just as urgent. And these are not problems for civil society to solve in the distributed manner that we see relief work happening. This requires institutional investment and capacity for service delivery. And you see it works in a lot of areas like education, health, where nonprofits have seen their roles as innovators and problem solvers. And we have Ashok who will speak later at, I'm sure, about the immense work that Akshara Foundation's done. Basically helping government or public systems improve. And the engine for scale there is the public system. And in the recent times, we've seen so much more work in this kind of model. We've seen technology startups starting to disrupt critical government systems. There's Khushi Baby that's plugged into the Nirogi Rajasthan scheme to extend the reach of immunization programs in maternal health care. We have organizations like People and Transform and Madhi in Tamil Nadu that are improving the quality of service delivery in education. There's Education Alliance in Delhi, which I'm sure those of you working in Delhi are familiar with, that has convened a wide array of solutions through the nonprofit private innovation world. But what's changing with COVID is the funding landscape for these kind of nonprofits. With each one of these that has improved public systems, you'll find that they are themselves privately funded, mostly through foundations and CSR. And we all know that in FY21, they'll be required to do 10x the work with 1/10 the funding. CSR, of course, is likely to go down as a total corpus of available money because, let's face it, all corporates won't be as profitable this year as they were in the past. And even that, the little money that will be available will be directed towards the immediate needs of COVID relief, not for systems change and capacity building. International funding will also reduce because COVID, unfortunately, is a global problem, affects the developed world as much as it has affected us. So in this scenario, we're really seeing the very survival of such nonprofits at risk. So if the government is serious about innovating for the bottom 250 million, and I'm sure it is, then the direction to take with a great sense of urgency is to ensure funding for innovative nonprofits solving problems with a purity of intent. There's a strong analogy to be made with what happened with privatization of several sectors a couple of decades ago. In the early 2000s, you saw privatization was the means to infuse innovation in sectors like aviation and banking, where there was money to be made. Today, it's time for nonprofits to be seen as the leaders of such innovation and to let them into the public system. So while it's an analogy, it's the opposite. Right? Public systems need to provision the programmatic funding needs of such nonprofits and not let it be picked up. There is no CSR to pick it up, right? And that's what we're dealing with. So this way, the capacity for innovation continues, and that innovation can be infused into public systems and sustained in an environment where this private funding is driving up really fast. Government also needs to enable this inflection with the same urgency that it drove changes to the ease of business norms. Right? We need to improve the ease of doing business with government for the non-profit sector as well. and do it in a manner that brings greater transparency, accountability, and quality to public systems, be it education, sanitation, health, across the board. I think these are the necessary conditions for us to be able to do the 10x amount of work that's required, even if philanthropic capital is not going to scale up for this kind of demand. So that I kind of hand it back to you, Karthik.
Wonderful. No, thank you, Sudha. Thank you, Sudha, for putting that so eloquently. I think, love that analogy. The ease of doing business, just like we've done that in sectors in the past for the private sector, the NGO sector also needs to be enabled and catalyzed. And for that, there needs to be a buy-in. And really the question is, how do we do that? So with that, we'll come to Viraj. Just a quick introduction first to Viraj. He's the CEO of the eGov Foundation. Viraj is passionate about the impact and jugalbandi, as he puts it, of public digital platforms, policies, and ecosystems in solving complex social issues at scale in an integrated manner, at scale and at speed. Prior to joining eGov, Viraj has been an entrepreneur and a senior corporate leader with a large range of businesses, both in Europe and in India. eGov Foundation, many of you guys would be familiar with. It is doing a lot of very interesting work across the board with multiple governments, really in sort of trying to transform urban governance using scalable and replicable technology solutions, working with different municipal operations to improve their decision making and improve service delivery using as much technology as possible. So Viraj, thank you very much for being with us. Given the nature of the work that you do and the nature of the topic of this panel, I'd love to hear from you as to specifically in the last 6 weeks, what have you guys been focused on? I know that there's this Digit platform that you guys have announced, and could you talk to us a little bit, not just about that, but overall,
yes.
Given the nature of your work, how are state governments responding to this? What sort of interventions are you seeing? And how optimistic are you and your prognosis for as we come out of this lockdown?
Absolutely.
For good public-private collaboration.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, and I think it's very interesting, Sudha, what you said about public goods. Hello. I think I'm getting a bit of a feedback. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Vera, we can hear you clearly.
I'm getting some echo. Hello, it's better now. It's fine. Okay, so I think it's very interesting. I'm very new to this sector, less than 4 years. In fact, Sandeep, I worked with Delhi Dialogue Commission in 2015 when Ashish Khetan was there, but for 9 months, did some work on policy on water and sewerage. And I think I came from a tech startup, so I had this innate belief that tech can solve a lot of problems. 4 years in, I think I'm wiser and I think I've got a bit more gray hair. I think I would like to qualify. I think our kind of theory of change has moved from saying tech can solve it to saying tech has to be a foundational layer, and then policy and ecosystem has to play a pivotal role for things to happen. I'll give you some learnings we've had in last 4 weeks, how creating foundational infra helps solve problems at speed. But I think where I lose sleep these days is that we've got a platform which can potentially go national with central government and with the state government. But where is the local contextual problem solving on that to really make the solutions live? Because given the complexity of and the diversity of problems we have, nobody can no organization or set of organization can solve it. So Aparna, if you can just, I just want to show a couple of slides just to, and then I'll talk about COVID in specifically. If you can share that. So yeah, I think that's what I think public digital platforms for transformation at scale and speed. If you can go to the next slide. And this is the problem we're trying to solve. How can we transform governance through an open digital infra for 2,000 cities and towns by 2020? And initially, I think first, we're a 17-year-old organization. I would say first 13, 14 years, we would just focus on tech. But as we move forward, if you can flip to the next slide, I will just. And that's what our mantra is now. It is, we feel technology is perhaps a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition to drive solve complex societal challenges. And we use this term Samaj Sarkar Bazaar. Sudha, you also alluded to it. And I would say, today almost 60% of energy is actually in non-tech, really working with governments on not just what technology they should use, but what kind of program structures they should have, what kind of reforms they should look at, with the people in non-profit sector on driving local policies changes or local adoption through last mile or first mile, people who are really intermeshed with the local societies, and obviously market players, because we do think marketplace need to play some role here, but some of the policy frameworks and the foundational infra should be there, so that it becomes a level playing field rather than trying to have a land grab. So I think if you go to the next slide, I'll just briefly tell you. So if you see, we are at I think we look at ourselves as only thing we do actively is creating a shared infra, and I'll give you some example of that in terms of how that came into being when we did the COVID stuff. And essentially, the shared infra is a bit like Android, for want of a better example, which is a context-independent digital infra, which can be used for multiple use cases, from doing a calendar app to a TikTok. And then there is a participation, which is the co-creation. How do you create diverse solutions? And that's why being a public digital platform is very important. Being open is very important. Having standards is very important, so that other people can, build easily on top of it. And those are the people who really, what we call co-creation environments. And then the final layer is the what we call participation layer or deployment layer, which is the amplification network, which is in our case, because service delivery is mainly through government. It's a public service delivery. So we work with governments from the first mile employees who actually do the work in the urban local bodies, to the the service delivery layer, the leadership layer, the municipal commissioners, and then the state leadership, and finally the government in the center. And and some of the amplification also happens through non-profits or NGOs who work in the local communities. In fact, Andhra, we had almost 1,300 volunteers who used to take the public grievance app to the slums and actually files kind of complaints on behalf of people there. So I think this is quite important for us to kind of communicate that unless there is a participation and we could make an open infra, innovation at speed cannot happen. If you can flip to the next slide, Aparna. So this is an example of, we built in COVID in 72 hours e-pass system that has been deployed by 9 states. If you see this playing out so at the base was our digit platform, which had workflow. We had things like trade licenses, which is essentially a certificate to do certain things based on certain rules. We had notifications, we had workflow. We just repackaged them, if you will, like a set of Lego blocks. And there were volunteers from, Make My Trip, from iSpirit, who had created their own, who worked this infra to create solution on top of it, which was the COVID e-pass for essential services providers to give bulk e-passes based on a trusted system. We had Unilever working with us to design the process. And finally, the amplification actually happened through the governments. So 9 states came on board in the space of 7 days. And I think it is very important, the point you made, Sudha, about what, somebody can ask this question, this could have been done by a private sector player, but I think the fact that civil society or the non-profits anchored it created a lot of trust in the system. The governments kind of rolled it out in a hurry. The center government approved it, and a lot of market players like EY, PwC, they worked in their respective states to help the governments roll it out. So this happened in a space of 72 hours. People, team of 15 people, some volunteers, some from eGov, worked on this to create this. So I think we believe with the government, the capacity to consume technology and capacity to, even if you make the best technology, unless there's a participation by people who are really entrenched in communities and entrenched in local context, it will still remain a top-down thing. And I believe with the infra that we haven't still achieved 10% of the potential which it might have. So I'll pause here. I think I've run out of time and take any questions later on.
Great. No, thank you, Raj. We'll definitely come back to questions. Just moving right along, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ashok Kamath, who I don't think needs much of an introduction. He's the chairman and the managing trustee of Akshara Foundation, where he leads strategic planning, analysis, expansion of programs. Akshara is probably one of the largest and most well-known NGOs in the education space. So, Mr. Kamath, we'd lovely to get your perspective on three things. One is, if you could share overall, firstly, how have you and Akshara been so successful in working with government in large states in delivering public education? And how have you been responding to the COVID challenge? Both the short-term challenge of adaptation of operations in the last 6-7 weeks and the long-term ongoing challenge of digital access in affordable education for this underprivileged segment.
Thank you so much, Karthik. Good morning, everyone. Karthik asked me to talk about what we've been doing prior to COVID, which will lend itself to what we did during COVID and what we think we should do after in the post-COVID era. Prior, we were very clear, as much as Viraj talked about, very clear that scale comes only working through the public system. 65% of our children go to schools in the public system. And these are the ones that would get affected in situations like COVID very, very easily. So we work closely with the state. In fact, across the states of Karnataka, Odisha, and Andhra, approximately 100,000 schools use a model that we've developed for teaching math for children between grades 1 and 5. Now, our model leverages existing resources. So teachers are there, so you leverage them. They need to be supplemented and empowered in many ways. So we've created all those tools, whether they are technology-based or in classroom-based processes. And to ensure continuity of classroom instruction in the home, we also created an online property called Building Blocks, which is, again, open source, free product, available, teaches math to children, grades 1 through 5, structured with the curriculum, the national curriculum framework and all the rest of it, and available in 9 Indian languages. So essentially, we have a footprint that probably covers 80-85% of the country. The product also works offline. So that was an important thing that we did. Perhaps a significant part of our model was the creation of local education volunteers who, prior to the COVID attack, were giving us approximately 2 hours per month of quality time. And we have a cadre in Karnataka of approximately 15,000 such workers, such education volunteers, right? So when COVID came about, we had a challenge. Schools were shut, so our people could not go out much. And yet we had this, suboptimal utilization of not only our people, but also this large network of, education volunteers. And we said we would put this to use. So in the 5-6 weeks that just ended yesterday, our people, the volunteers as well as our own people, have reached out to nearly 292,000 households, meeting the households with all the social distancing norms, masks and everything, and advising them and making them aware of the dangers of the virus and what they should be doing and so on. Now, to make this happen, we worked with approximately 14,500 education department officials, from DDPI down to school headmasters, and another 32,800 community members like Gram Panchayat members, school monitoring committee members, and Panchayat development officers and so on. So this, effectively has helped us reach out to, we think conservatively, about 1 million people. If you assume 5 persons per household, we've kind of reached over 1 million people. More important, the Building Blocks app, wherever there were smartphones, we've had the parents install them so that they can keep their children engaged. And on each phone, we can anchor up to 6 children by giving them avatars. So we think upwards of 60, 70,000 children have now started to do math on a smartphone, on an entry-level smartphone. So this is what we've done during the downtime, during the lockdown period. We are obviously concerned, like everybody else, what happens when schools reopen. We need to worry about physical distancing norms. We also need to worry about the fact that many of these children need to come to school. If for nothing, they need to come to school to get the midday meal. Many children do depend on that midday meal. We are also aware that if you go fully online, those that don't have digital access devices in their homes will lose, and therefore you need to, that digital divide will further widen. And of course, the reactions could be that can we have 2 shifts, one in the morning and one in the afternoon? And I feel that in a lot of rural communities, the last bus leaves the village at 4 o'clock. So it's not likely that the teacher is going to stay, beyond that time. So we need to find an alternate to all of this. Our idea was to make this half and half, but with a twist. We are leveraging the MHRD has a platform called Diksha, on which our content is available. And so is content available from multiple other players. Okay, and I'm only talking about open source content that could be used freely. So we are suggesting and working out the details right now that if you have half the children in the classroom with the social distancing norms, the other half could be given homework by scanning. The states are printing textbooks with QR codes that if you scan that, it takes you to the appropriate content on the Diksha platform. So if teachers if you can think of a class of 30, I have 15 in the class and 15 are doing homework. And in the homes, the children are basically scanning and studying. And the next day, the children are reversed, and those who are at home today will be in the classroom tomorrow. Now, what that does is everyone gets the same amount of time from the teacher, and hopefully removes the digital divide. So where do these phones come from, right? So we are saying that there's got to be a way of getting the governments not to buy them, but to lease them and create entrepreneurship in the rural communities. Because remember, with all this migrant population also going back, we're going to have shortages of jobs in rural communities. So can we make some of them, entrepreneurs who will lease these phones to the state, to the schools, in exchange for X rupees per child per month as a lease fee, and they will manage all the logistics. What are the logistics? Every day, the phones have to come back to the school for sanitization and recharging, and the phones get swapped between the kids. Those who are in the classroom don't get the phones. Those who are not in the classroom will carry the phones back. So we're thinking of doing a pilot of this sort to show proof of concept over the next few weeks and see where it takes us. Really, it is important for us to not let the virus get the better of us, because the scare is that children may drop out in large numbers if we don't do things right, and that would be another sign of taking more and more people into poverty. So I think education is key to a robust revival and a robust future. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was extremely, extremely insightful. And that last point that you mentioned, it couldn't be more true. Many folks are looking at healthcare obviously as a critical sector, but education, both for primary and pre-primary, but also skilling, right? Because it also involves getting people back into their jobs. So, and frankly, skilling of healthcare workers. So as a broad area, we're seeing a lot of interest here. So thank you very much for those remarks, and we'll come back to questions later. Moving on to our fourth speaker, Ghanshyam Tiwari. I'd just like to quickly introduce Ghanshyam. Ghanshyam is the founder and national coordinator for Parliamentarians and Innovators for India, or PII, or PI India. This is an initiative that was recently set up by Ghanshyam, which basically brings together a group of eminent members of parliament across political parties, along with a group of impact investors and innovators like Asha Impact and other funds, and public policy experts in healthcare. And this is essentially a committee which meets once a week and with a secretariat that Ghanshyam has set up, which is evaluating, I would say, more than several dozen proposals. Ghanshyam can tell us exactly how many, but like the ACT grants, anyone who's working on something important COVID related, and these are not just venture-backed companies, but often NGOs, civil society initiatives in a variety of areas, from data science, community health, to feed migrant workers. PII is essentially connecting all of these initiatives with parliamentarians who are interested in applying these in their respective constituencies, essentially helping these NGOs scale up. Prior to this, Ghanshyam, has been an alumnus of the Harvard Kennedy School and IIM Bangalore. He has worked in the policy space, advising multiple chief ministers and parliamentarians, as well as large development organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He was the founder of the Harvard India Conference. And most recently, Ghanshyam was the national spokesperson for the Samajwadi Party and a candidate for the parliamentary elections from Bihar in 2019. So Ghanshyam, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we would love it if you can share a little bit about your work at PII and how specifically some of these innovations that different NGOs are working on can be scaled up in partnership with MPs and other government agencies.
Thank you, Karthik. Good morning, everyone. It is great to be part of this discussion that is stirring the minds of people across the country, and also giving a compass to everyone who's working on COVID across the country. And it is great to hear from Sudha, from Viraj, Ashok. We'll hear from Sandeep, people who are doing phenomenal work in the face of this pandemic that is shaking the foundations of how we as a society live. When I started looking at COVID situation, this was before Government of India took notice of COVID situation. I saw that much like some of the political actors who are not in government, I saw that there's a major challenge coming, and we have to take up this challenge politically, as enterprise, as startups, as not-for-profits, in a way that we can save the country from the misery that this challenge will face, both in social life, for the poor, and in terms of economy. So while my political position was clearly defined that it was mindless to put the country on a lockdown with a 4-hour notice and then go into a kirtan and diya mode without doing anything substantial when it was staring in our face. In February, we wasted time in Namaste Trump. In March, we wasted time in ensuring that the Madhya Pradesh government falls. But that's my political position. That did not stop me from thinking about what will be the role of members of parliament in India in the face of this crisis. We have nearly 800 members of parliament with their MP-led fund that would have been 4,000 crores that was taken away. Yet these are people with high public standing, decades of work in public life, and they cover every district across the country, every state across the country. So that thought that governments are at the forefront of responding to COVID, members of parliament have huge public standing within the scope of government, and as a result, we need to communicate a bipartisan united response to COVID. That led to foundation of Parliamentarians with Innovators for India, piindia.org, where the focus is, can we really bring together members of parliament across party lines? We have today politicians, parliamentarians from more than 10 parties, 12 states, who come together every week to discuss solutions that have come from across the country to focus on COVID situation. And these solutions are really, while our focus was healthcare, these solutions have covered all kinds of spaces. I would showcase a solution that in some way I nudged with a team that was already working on this space, which is the case of missed vaccines in India. We will have probably 1 million kids who would miss their vaccines because of this lockdown. And this is the first time we'll have such a pending backlog of kids missing the vaccine. Then there are situations where we can use used containers to create, to augment the spaces where clinics are there to serve both healthcare professionals as well as patients, as well as migrants. There's a case where somebody from IIT Delhi has created a mask which is as good as N95 mask, and we are looking at the possibility of tying up with members of parliament, IITs across the country, IIMs, so that these IITs and IIMs become the nodal agencies where these masks can be distributed. We are looking at the problem that blood banks are going to run dry, and how do we need to mobilize solutions towards that. With Sandeep and several other innovators, we looked at how do we feed people in this situation when hunger becomes a critical thing. One challenge that I have faced in building this up is obviously the aspects that funds are not available is there. This is entirely a voluntary exercise. And as I raise funds towards that, we are in that phase. But funds have not been an issue because people have readily given their time, skills, and conviction to build it up. But the real challenge that I face, where Nudge and this entire activity can play a huge role, is in the last 5 years, when I built a startup in education here in India, I saw that our canvas of innovation is limited. It is limited because it is often run by engineers, bankers, CAs, MBAs, right? And as a result, its core access is technology, limited life experience, limited knowledge of social sectors, health sector, important sectors. As a result, we try to solve the same problem with a solution we already have. So it is important for us together to collaborate and expand this canvas of what the problem is. Today, with eminent journalists, Barkha and Faye, who was there yesterday, and spoke about some of the problems. I think the problems are staring us in our face. The problem is that the political leadership has not been beefed up sufficiently to face this situation. As we think about centralized response, we also think about the power of democracy, which is really decentralized response. So technologically, we can think about how capable our individual panchayats are or how local bodies are to face this crisis. We have edtech solutions that can teach them. We can look at what is the level of knowledge that exists in medical or healthcare workers in Bihar or Eastern UP that will face a bunch of the bulk of the migrant crisis. And can we beef that up with knowledge that exists in Maharashtra, in Karnataka? So technology can do it, but it is important that together we expand the canvas for those who are willing to solve through innovations in this situation. Finally, I would like to say that collectively, this is a moment where if I take an analogy, Titanic is sinking. Titanic is the old world order, right? We can have an imagination of what the new world order will be, but what really counts is what is our role in this moment of crisis. If we take a pole position, whatever be our role, right? Be it education for those who are missing education because of lack of mobile phones in their hand, be it mobilizing political leadership, mobilizing the professional talent pool in India. We have 45 million people on LinkedIn, and it is time, while we stay home, stay safe, we don't switch off. We ask everyone that what are you doing to solve a problem right now that improves lives in your local community, your local area tomorrow, right? So I think collectively, it is that moment of leadership as well as crisis where we have to provoke everyone, politically, apolitically, citizens, professionals, that what can you do beyond money to solve for this situation? And as these images play in front of us, which is about misery of migrants, right? At one level, they may make us indifferent about it because we are just seeing too many of them. But if we are empathetic, it will not make us indifferent. It should make us think. It should tell us that we need to step up and do something. So at PI India, we have done call for solutions focused on health. We will be doing soon a call for solutions focused on migrants, rural education, employment and jobs. And I would invite collaboration to do what I think is the most important thing, which is a call for problems. which is tying up with organizations that have worked in a dedicated manner in specific areas to come on a common platform and narrate one problem that they think that people can solve irrespective of the government and can solve in a decentralized manner. So these are the three things. I would like to take a couple of more minutes to play one video that just highlights how massive one problem that is not in the limelight is going to become for the country that we are trying to solve. Aparna or Karthik, if you can play the video.
Let's just play that video. Aparna? Aparna, you're on mute. Huh? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Barriers to getting their children vaccinated. We work with health departments in Bihar and Maharashtra to send reminders to all families. Work with prominent medical colleges in Maharashtra.
So while this comes up, and basically what we are looking at is that how do we tackle this situation where kids are going to miss vaccines? In a lot of poor areas, kids would go into these health melas where vaccines would be given. We are a global success case on immunization, but will that success case remain? Depends on how we react to the situation. And that's what this video will tell us.
I apologize for the technical difficulties, Ghanshyam. What we'll do is we'll share the YouTube link for the video in the chat, and we'll share it with all the speakers. But if you don't mind, just in the interest of time, we'll just quickly cover Sandeep, and then we can come back to the Q&A. So Sandeep Narwani, welcome. Sandeep is also associated with implementing some of the PII projects on the ground. Just to give a brief introduction, Sandeep is an engineer who turned into a social entrepreneur, who turned into a journalist, turned into a civil society activist. So Sandeep has been active with the Delhi government's Delhi Dialogue Commission and a member of the Aam Aadmi Party, and basically playing the role of a facilitator between the government and civil society organizations, and very, very active in the COVID response in the state of Delhi. So Sandeep, it'll be great to hear your perspective overall on what's really happening on the ground, right? What is the specific context of Delhi? There's some unique things happening here. For example, in February, a lot of the NGOs had come together for food relief. So that inherent collaboration amongst NGOs was picked up on by COVID. And then of course, the proactiveness that you guys as the Aam Aadmi Party have shown in appointing people in each constituency to work with these NGOs. So if you could share your overall thoughts about civil society, government collaboration, Sandeep, and then specifically some of these initiatives, PII related or otherwise, that you're working on the ground right now, which really demonstrate how civil society is working with NGOs to address the COVID challenge.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karthik. And thanks to the Nudge Foundation, Nasha, in fact, for inviting me here. I'm very grateful to you. And I'll start with the story about one which you just mentioned about the NGOs coming together. This is a story that I think is a perfect example of distributed leadership on the ground. There were riots in Delhi in late February. That's something that we'll never forget. But there was a time in crisis when a lot of NGOs came together. Those who were perhaps who had never done riot relief before in their lives, and they started serving communities who were affected by the riots. This collective was called Delhi Relief Collective. They made a WhatsApp group, and little did they know that there was a COVID pandemic to follow very soon. As soon as the COVID pandemic happened, this collective was the first one that became the first response team from the civil society in helping out people. As we all know, the lockdown happened with a very, very small warning. So there were all kinds of problems that were happening in the first few days of the lockdown. And I'm going to briefly just run through those, remind you all about those issues, and then come to the solutions that the government came up with. One of them was, of course, stranded migrants. Second one was a food shortage in many parts. And thirdly was the health crisis, of course. In all three, I thought that the NGOs played a very critical role. I'm going to tell you two examples of how the Delhi government has used NGOs has interwoven with NGOs to have a coherent response to the COVID crisis. The first one is that the Deputy Chief Minister himself of the state, Mr. Manish Sisodia, formed an advisory group under him, which had NGO representatives in it. And the second example is that we had one NGO representative mapped to each district of Delhi. So there would be perfect coordination in terms of, feedback from the ground and expertise coming from NGOs inside the system. I thought that both these mechanisms were very effective in the first few days of the lockdown in getting not just, high quality people inside the system, but also to kind of plug gaps which would otherwise have taken far more longer for the system to plug on its own. There were some great things that the NGOs did by themselves without the state, and I have to highlight those as well. In this one is that the NGOs were cooperating within themselves. Like I said, the Delhi Relief Collective was one of them, which grew. And during the riot stage, maybe there were 20, but right now there must be maybe 80 or 100 NGOs in that group. The NGOs grew in strength, and the bigger NGOs started working with the smaller NGOs, which I thought was quite something, because for things like verification of beneficiaries for direct cash transfer, it was the smaller local NGOs at the last mile which were able to do that very effectively, while some of the other NGOs, the bigger ones in other states, were transferring the money. The second thing is about the repatriation of migrant workers. It was extremely difficult for community workers to operate in this environment when there was a health hazard for themselves, and but kudos to them. I think the civil society again stepped up and did something that's unprecedented. I hope that the work will continue, because we're still not even out of the lockdown yet, and we still have some way to go ahead. And that's where I want to thank Ghanshyam and his team, who've been incredible in sourcing innovations to us. And I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about our experience with PII. PII has kind of brought in a lot of optimistic innovators inside the system. And the good thing about working with these innovators is that they don't have any baggage. They're completely new. They're not from civil society or from the NGO sector. They're professionals like Ghanshyam just mentioned, and who wanted to change the world, who had a great idea, and they wanted to step up in the times of crisis and do something. We've been able to implement a couple of innovations that have come from PII, and the learnings that I have had that innovators don't actually need much from the state. First thing is that they need a bunch of permissions to wade the system. They because they don't understand the bureaucratic machinery, the governance mechanisms. So every now and then, an innovator would need a little bit of handholding to navigate and wade through the system. The second is most innovators require data to operate. Some data points, critical data points that are not in public domain, perhaps. And lastly, I think innovators do have a need for financial capacity, which I think the state is very capable in connecting them with other partners. So we had a really good innovator coming through from PII, who's going to be doing corona simulations. And of course, it's a big project, but we've been able to connect that innovator with IIT Bombay, who has received a grant from MHRD to do corona simulations. So hopefully, innovators will plug in their resources with each other, intellectual and financial, and come up with some groundbreaking products. And I would say that in the end, before I wrap up, the system, the public delivery system itself, at times creates inequities, rather unfortunately. But these inequities can be plugged only when innovators come in at different stages, not just the last mile, but also within the system. So I hope that not just Delhi, but even other states will start welcoming innovators within the system. And right now, our dire need is to plug gaps mainly in the food supply machinery, because as you all know, that if that most of the population, like maybe 70, to give you a number, 72 lakh people in Delhi are dependent on the ration system, on the PDS system, and then we've got another temporary ration scheme as well, which is again catering to about 10 to 12 lakh people. So beyond this 72 and 12 lakhs, Delhi has a population of 2 crore people, 20 million people, and we still have a lot of people who are out of the safety net, and that's where the innovators can play a huge role, massive role. I'll end with that and look forward to some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandeep, and thanks to all of you. I think this was a very, very interesting discussion, and we've heard of a lot of examples. I've just tried to summarize 5 key points, one from each of you, in terms of the 5 key takeaways, which I'll just quickly summarize, and then we have maybe time for 1 or 2 questions. So I'll read out those questions, and anyone who wants to respond can respond. So in summary, I think what are some of the key takeaways here? Number 1, as Sudha mentioned, there's really a need to improve the ease of doing business. I love that phrase for NGOs, and that NGOs are facing a difficult funding landscape. So this is a very, very critical topic. As Viraj said, tech is not enough. Of course, tech is critical in terms of having solutions, but it's really about the policies and ecosystems. And you also mentioned a very interesting point that often if a not-for-profit is delivering the services, it generates greater credibility than the private sector, like with your COVID pass. So NGOs are well placed if they're tech-enabled to collaborate and build that ecosystem. Mr. Kamath, you gave some amazing examples of the innovations that your organizations and leading NGOs are doing. And what really struck out, what really stood out was the huge numbers involved in terms of, all those people in the public sector that you're able to mobilize, whether it's, school teachers or community workers or so forth. And again, this emphasis on simple tech, right? But which is well delivered, which can be a simple smartphone which 5 people can use at home. So it's really about that scale that comes with government and the efficient delivery. Ghanshyam mentioned some amazing points about the importance of localization and decentralization, about mobilizing professionals to work on these problems, sharing of best practices, and how you do need the right type of political buy-in to enable that. And of course, Sandeep spoke further about some of those examples. And I like how you ended it, Sandeep, by saying that it's not as complicated as we think. At the end of the day, if there's an openness on the part of government, innovators just need some permissions and some data. And then this connecting of the dots, this glue between civil society and government, is precisely what all of you are working on. So it was very, very insightful. And, thank you guys for sharing all of that. I personally have a few questions myself, but we don't have too much time. So maybe I can select one of the questions which has come in here. And really, I guess it's about collaboration, right? So one question is, what should be the role of the state government versus the private sector in service delivery to citizens? Is it a case of balance, or is it a case of the government becoming more of an enabler and moving more towards private provision? Because often, sometimes people say that the private sector shouldn't be involved in certain things, right? And there's this confusion. Do you mean the for-profit private sector or the not-for-profit private sector? So perhaps if each of you can just maybe give a short closing comment on overall what you see as the role of the state, if you were to advise, your state government, what should they do? If we can just maybe go across and have each of you share, your closing thoughts, that would be helpful.
So it is music to my ears to hear Ghanshyam and Sandeep speak. And this question that falls right in. I think the role of the state government is to actively scout for innovations and new ways of solving old problems. COVID has provided that wonderful inflection point in which this has become possible. Not just people that have made it their life's work to solve problems as non-profits, but also probably innovators who will do it for short bursts of time. I think the government has a responsibility to scout for these actively through channels like PII. And bring it into public systems, supporting with money where needed. And maybe even make a budgetary allocation in this financial year for such innovations, not leave it to serendipity.
That's a great idea. Ghanshyam?
Yes, absolutely. I think this is truly, while the Prime Minister spoke about being vocal about local, but truly this is a hyper-local movement of India, where because of social distancing, travel issues, each village is its own mini republic, or each town is its own mini republic. And one can look at the skill pool of that village, the resource pool available, the idea pool available. You can think about something as simple as LinkedIn groups for each member of parliament that focus on that particular district, that particular constituency. And as a result, the role of the state is really to be the incubator of ideas, but it is eventually the products and services have to be locally deployed by local people. If collectively all of us with our effort in the next 1 month, let us say identify one good not-for-profit or for-profit or a team that is working in one block across the country, right? Across more than 700 districts that we in India have, right? That would be huge service, because we give that team, not for profit, for profit credibility. They become the engines of that hyper local setup in India, and it suddenly changes the vantage point with which we operate, from the point of doing something end to end to doing something to the end that will deliver eventually.
Absolutely. Viraj, Mr. Kamath, anything you guys wanted to add?
Yeah, so let me just, take it in a more concrete manner. So if you take, this Android app that we talked about, the building blocks, right? So it required funding from the corporate sector. In this case, it was Cisco, to help us create that problem, the product, right? Then when it comes to delivery, you need multiple channels. The state government pitched in by printing textbooks. So to give you a sense, in June of 2020, across 4 states, 33 million textbooks would have QR codes that will link it to this. Okay, so that's a large, reach, if you will, right? And to make that happen, we had to unbundle things so that it's aligned chapter by chapter to the text. So there's that little bit of work. During the COVID time, when education volunteers go door to door, that's the last mile delivery that's important. So I think you need to be able to take all of these we've done it across 1 state at this point. And of course, the Diksha platform is across 4 states, but nothing to prevent all things going across the entire country.
I think when you look at service delivery over a longer period of time, I think the government's role has to be, I think, 2, and that's a common across any delivery. I would say first is creating some foundational infrastructure. I mean, you take highways as an example. Government builds the highways, then puts the policies around who pays for it, what is our revenue share, what are the specs for building it. So I think creating foundational infra is quite important. I think that's something government is uniquely placed to do, because it needs investment, and it needs certain and linked to that is policy. Can you create enabling policies? I think some of the things, we have had so many innovators come to us saying, we want to build something on top of it. But can the government procure it? Can there be a policy around procuring small startups and, testing those things out? So I think unless there's a enabling policies that government creates, we had wonderful, there's Smart, who you guys know from Nudge Foundation, right? He's got a wonderful solution to smartify the toilets, and he can use our infra to build it. But really, for the government to procure it and scale it, it is extremely hard with the current procurement policies. So I think one of the key things government should solve for, and COVID is a great example of, some of the unsolved policy issues actually come in the way, right? To actually do things quickly. So I think unless some of the policy roadblocks are removed and you have enabling policies, recognizing that you need to have local innovation, right? Just getting innovators together may not actually solve problem. In a crisis, it might, because everybody has a gun on their head. But on a long-term basis, it'll be extremely hard, in my mind. So I think policies and infra. I mean, Diksha is a great example of infra. It's say infra that government has provided. Yeah. It's a standard infra that any educator who has content can use it to promote their content, and that gives you scale across the country. So those are the 2 points I want to make.
Wonderful. Well, look, we're right on the hour, so I wanted to once again thank all of you. And that last point, Viraj, that you made is a perfect segue into our next session, which I hope you will all stay around for, which is a keynote session moderated by Pramod Bhasin, along with 2 speakers from the policy world, Jasmine Shah from the Delhi Dialogue Commission and Mr. Deepak Singhal, IAS, who was the former Chief Secretary of UP. So right after this, in fact, we're going to be looking at some of those policy issues. And again, I'd like to thank all of you for being part of this discussion to discuss how NGOs and civil society can partner with government. And now we'll listen to the perspective from the government officials themselves. So with that, thank you all very much. Thank you to Nudge, and thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
यार आप few minutes late चल रहे हैं मैसेज आया running few minutes late please get started.
Yes, so we should be starting in another minute or two. I think we're just waiting for Pramod to get back on the call.
Yeah, he actually just messaged saying he's running a few minutes late. I think his previous panel is running over.
In the meantime, can we check our videos, Arpana?
Yes, yes.
Because it's not, I'm starting the video, it's not getting connected. You have to de-host it.
Okay, let me just look into that.
Hi, Jasmine. Is your video working? Did you check?
I cannot see my video coming into you.
Yes,
yeah,
we see you.
Now it's better.
Hi, everyone. This is Jasmine.
Hi, Jasmine. Welcome. This is Karthik here from Charcha Impact. Hi,
Thank you.
Mr. Singhal. Pleasure to have you with us.
Hello, Mr. Jasmine and Mr. Karthik.
Hello, Mr. Singhal. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, good pleasure.
Pramod is just running a couple of minutes over from his previous session.
No problem, no problem. So let's have chit chat with Jasmine in the meantime.
Yeah.
What's your experience, Jasmine, in Delhi? I worked 38 years cabinet secretary. My batchmates, we're all batchmates together. So.
No, I can imagine. You are. We have a lot to learn from you and hear from you today.
No.
I have been in the development sector for 15 years, but with the Delhi government for the last 4 years. I've been working in think tanks and non-profits as well as the private sector before this.
So, which private sector, Jasmine?
So this was my first job, was ITC in the FMCG, and then worked in urban policy, by and large, monitoring, evaluation, research, many of those roles. In Delhi, there is this commission that we have, Dialogue and Development Commission. It is, in a way, a mini Niti Aayog at the state level. It's
I'm aware. I keep on speaking to your chief minister every 10 days on mobile. So
okay, all right, you're aware about DDC.
So no, we are all in touch with each other. So
wonderful.
Wherever the issue, I have created a SOP because everything has to be done on autopilot today. It's a dark tunnel. So I send an SOP to Arvindji also to get it implemented in Delhi. I'm happy that he has picked up a lot of points in that, and because he's very open most of the time to suggestions.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the decision maker, politicians, has to take their own decisions. But it's an open kind of person who can get the viewpoints of various people and try to get it implemented. Because today the challenge is implementation on the ground. Today, see, we've been telling that no one should go in trucks. 24 people have been killed in accident.
Yeah, absolutely.
So telling on screen and ground situation is different. So you yourself see in Delhi, first day you had 2 lakh people in ISBT terminal.
Yeah.
So things are, things have to be seen what is there on the ground.
Hi everyone. This is Pramod. I'm so sorry I was late. The other panel ran over by a few minutes. Who else do we have here?
Hi, Pramod.
Karthik, you want to go on? Karthik, may I suggest if you could also go off video?
Yeah.
Thank you. But Deepakji, thank you so much for being here. And Jasmine, thank you for joining in. Really appreciate it. We have the Charcha team and we have the Asha Impact team with Karthik and Aparna and everybody else here, and Sanchi. Again, I apologize for being slightly late, but we have a, who do we have from the Charcha team over here right now? Do we have anyone?
Yes, Pramod, this is Sriram here.
Okay.
I've been basically anchoring the philanthropy and fundraising track and closely working with Karthik and team on this.
All right, wonderful. Well, our discussion today is about the role of government in the new normal. And I thought what we could do is talk about it in 2 or 3 ways. One is how do we think about what the government can or can't do in today's environment? How should it open up given the level of uncertainties, given this is not going away? Now, most of our audience and the people will have already read up on this. In many cases, we don't need to go over, what is already known. But I think the issues in India are unique and very problematic. The issues of migrant workers, employees, etc., are also very, very problematic. So I want to touch on that and how the world will open up, how the economy will open up, what will happen to the individuals, what will happen to all of us as citizens of this wonderful country. But then also move to the post-COVID world. What are the changes we should make? How do we all need to work better together? The lack of trust between government and citizens and industry is profound. How do we overcome some of those issues? In particular, Jasmine, I'll come to you, particularly in Delhi, how has the government, been able to rope in all the volunteer efforts, everything else that has happened to try and solve many of these issues, which really have formed the backbone of the government's effort in many ways today. Deepakji, you've been the Chief Secretary of UP, and you, as you said to me a short while ago, you've been there for 38 years in UP. Very few people have spent that much time in one state doing everything from district collector to home secretary to chief secretary, etc. In particular, the issues in UP are profound. So let me open this up. First, if I may, Jasmine, I'll come to you. Tell me what you think, how this opening up is going to happen, because this problem is not going to go away anytime soon. And there is a sense of fear in India that our healthcare infrastructure will not be able to cope, and our population is just way too much to deal with this issue. Our numbers are already crossing China. Social distancing is a myth for most people. To ask them to keep social distance is, to some extent, not practically possible. It isn't going to happen. We don't have testing capabilities to the level we have. In that context, how does one go forward? And then I'll come to you, Deepakji, if you won't mind, to get your thoughts on that. But Jasmine, may I turn to you, and may I ask you just to introduce yourself very quickly also for 30 seconds.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Pramod, and thanks to Charcha. It's my pleasure to participate in this discussion today. Very briefly, I'm a graduate of IIT Madras and Columbia University. I have worked in the private sector, in some think tanks, in the non-profit sector, and for the last 4 years, I have been associated with the Delhi government. I had this body of Delhi government called the Dialogue and Development Commission, which advises the government. It is led by the Chief Minister, and I'm the Vice Chairperson. It advises different ministries and departments on both policy design as well as implementation, and especially it acts as a bridge to the external stakeholders, trying to forge more and more collaborations and partnerships as we try addressing some of the complex governance challenges that Delhi faces. Now, Pramod, the question that you asked in terms of how do we in India should think about post-COVID world, right? First and foremost, I think our language has to be living with COVID world, because right now we don't see when is a post-COVID world going to dawn upon us. So what does living with COVID world look like? Because yes, we figured out, lockdown, ordering a lockdown has been difficult on millions of people, but the mechanics of it, we figured out what has to be shut down, and it's easier relatively, I would say. But when you think about opening up after this lockdown phase, I do not think any kind of a unified central strategy makes any sense. There are many different Indias within India. Within a state itself, there are large cities which function there. A, the risk of COVID spread is higher, and B, their healthcare management capabilities are different than other parts of the same state, perhaps. Therefore, I think there is a big need to really empower the state governments and really decentralize some of this decision making and preparation tasks. Now, especially in Delhi, there are one or two very clear ways in which we, led by our Chief Minister, Mr. Arvind Kejriwal, have been thinking about these issues. Given the current scientific evidence, we know that COVID is not going to die down anytime soon, which means that the entire purpose of the lockdown was to actually ensure that we really ramp up our healthcare infrastructure or our preparations. I mean, you can't build too many new infrastructure, you have to repurpose existing infrastructure. But in terms of supplies of PPEs, ventilators, protocols, exactly the testing capabilities, these are the things that most cities and the high risk areas of the country ought to have figured out by now, because we're already around 45 to 50 days into the lockdown phase. And especially when it comes to Delhi, it's something that we say with a lot of care, that we feel really prepared that, right now we are at around 5,000 active cases. Even if it goes up to 30,000, we have a plan which is already set in place. But of course, if we have to go even beyond that, we are very confident that this is something, I don't think we will reach that point. But this is something that in Delhi, with the infrastructure that Delhi has and with the staff and the personnel that Delhi has, we can manage it. And therefore, the costs of the lockdown have to be weighed with the benefits of the lockdown. And we are seeing that, with every passing day, it is putting a humongous toll in our economy, on the livelihoods of our people, and there is a humanitarian crisis that is brewing. So that is why we are one of the states which are leading this call of saying that, yes, now let's put our energies and focus in opening up our economy. We have collectively as a nation locked down. There have been benefits. Everybody agrees with that. But the entire energy and focus now needs to go into restore back our economy, because beyond a point, even states are not going to be able to, without any revenues, you're not going to be able to pay for your hospital staff or, any additional healthcare strategy efforts. So that's broadly how we've been thinking about. Just one more point I would like to add, Pramod, is amidst all of this, the humanitarian side of what governments ought to do has been very, very clear. This is something that, along with ensuring that we care for our doctors, nurses, provide testing and bed facilities, taking care of those who do not have a shelter or food to eat is also one of the primary duties. And as far as Delhi is concerned, the entire city, we are very proud how the entire city has come up, be it NGOs, be it volunteers of Aam Aadmi Party, be it civil defense volunteers, be it RWAs, multiple stakeholders have really come together to set up close to 2,500 food distribution points. And, we are feeding close to 10 lakh people lunch and dinner every single day. Ration has been given out to 1 crore out of the 2 crore people of Delhi. So there has been effort, and all these systems were built over the last 45 days, because we never had 2,500 cooked food distribution points. So clearly there was a massive effort that was put in. A lot of it was because civil society worked together with us. The government was there as an entity to lead and to coordinate, which is important, rather than relegating the entire work to the civil society. And I feel there is that semblance that, yes, Delhi has been able to take care of the humanitarian needs at this point in time, but our effort now is to open up.
Pramod, you need to unmute yourself, please. You're on mute.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So, Jasmine, I'll come back to you on many of these points, because I think there are significant issues that are ahead of us, not just in Delhi, and I want to go beyond Delhi, because this is a global audience and being done from everywhere. So I want to go into India and what we should do as a country versus what perhaps other countries have done. But I want to come to Deepakji. Deepakji, you've been a representative of the most populous state in India, 250 million, 25 crore logon ke liye. The infrastructure that is available there, the reality of that India is perhaps something none of us are really familiar with. So will you tell us about it, what the challenges are, and how we should try and tackle them at this time?
Pramodji, first of all, I'd like to say thanks to Charcha and to your august audience that you are giving us an opportunity to share some experiences and our thoughts on the subject, which is a national, international crisis, and this our generation has never thought of. Sometimes we are thinking that we have the nature has really done an attack on the humanity, that you have attacked us 60, 70 years in our generation. Now this is for the time for us to attack humanity, and you see the environment has become cleaner in lockdowns, and lot of people are not going to the hospitals. The people are doctors telling the disease is lesser. Now coming back to your fundamental question, uh, the biggest challenge today is the three dimensions of corona, which I like to share one by one. And one is the political dimension. Second is the migratory population, which is a key issue today. And third is the dimension, which I think is the economic dimension. And fourth is the medical dimension, which is the thing which I want to say. So one by one, if we take the political dimension, Pramodji, I like to say this is the time that country is in a war mode. So my request at that stage is, and that a message to especially to the media, to everyone, that this is a time that there should be a national kind of thinking in the government, oppositions, on everyone. They have to work together for betterment of people. Humanity is the first criteria which is to come in. They can give constructive suggestions, but as Mr. Jasmine was telling, I completely agree that the solution is decentralization, because India is a very big country. What you do in Delhi is not equally. If you see, go to Balia, Basti, Gonda, Bahraich, these areas now, they will head for floods next month, and there are additional crises which will be coming in, which will not come in Delhi. So what kind of floods will come in this time? You don't know. The dark tunnel of corona is also there. The economy is a very, the people are in abject poverty in Eastern UP. We are all well aware about these things. So if you see a composite package, so the political, my only request is that whatever we design, it should be highly decentralized. And I like to quote from my administrative experience, section 60, 46, 47, 48 of the Disaster Management Act, which supports Jasmine's point of view that everything should be in terms of management, and the finance should be decentralized to the local district collector. It is defined in the act. And the government should come out immediately for mitigation and response funds, which is defined in the act. There should be specific funds which should be coming out. Some efforts have been done. A lot of people are doing effort, but now the government machinery is also tired. You should see that last 2.5 months in Maharashtra today, we heard 1,200 policemen has got corona. A lot of government machinery is also now totally tired of the situation. And so everything we have to see in the management of corona is like an ATC. Suppose जबरदस्त तूफान आता रहे और सारे जहाज दिल्ली में ना उतर पाए, तो 90% जहाज has to be diverted somewhere. So ATC doesn't take command from the Chief Minister of Delhi or Prime Minister of India. Some person sitting at ATC drives the aircrafts. So my only suggestion as an administrator is everything has to go in an autopilot route, because it's a dark tunnel. It's a very difficult tunnel. Second part is the migration part, which is a serious challenge today. No, I don't want to get into all that. Some countries where they did give a lot of time, and I think we have to all accept. Honorable Prime Minister also accepted that वो इस बात पे दुखी हैं कि लोगों को इतना कष्ट झेलना पड़ रहा है. It means we should not do a kind of analysis that we did something wrong, but what we can do today, because after all, if these people could have gone 45 days back nearest to their homes at that time by railways, and this crisis should have never come कि आज जाके 24 लोग मर गए औरैया में और महाराष्ट्र में मर गए और रेलवे में 16 लोग मर गए. It becomes very pathetic situation, because there you realize that 68% population of India, rural India, क्या उनको सम्मान से जीने का हक नहीं है क्या? तो ग्राउंड रियलिटी क्या उनको खाली हम लोग को जो दिल्ली में बैठे हैं नोएडा में उन्हीं को सम्मान से जीने का हक है? ये एक बड़ी पैथेटिक सिचुएशन, राइट फ्रॉम फर्स्ट डे फ्रॉम बस स्टैंड टू today's day, lakhs and crores of people are giving. Secondly, जो इसका मैनेजमेंट जो है वो उसके challenges क्या हैं, what is the solution? That is the thing which I like to sum up in 2-3 words. Challenge, what are the challenges? I start from my home. I don't have money in Surat. मेरे पास, I want to go to my parents, so I have to go. Means you tell me to stop back, I will not stop back. Now if I start, then only solution is either you may transform so Surat, नहीं तो मैं पैदल चल दूंगा रास्ते में जहां जहां जाता जा रहा हूं. Second way is government says we will give you food packets on the highway. Tell me, I've been a collector for almost commissioner 12 years. Which administrative machinery is available on highway on the behalf of the revenue department to give you food packets? वो रास्ते में लंगर ही लगेंगे और कुछ नहीं हो सकता है. It is not possible in a highway of 300 kilometers कि every kilometer there is a तहसीलदार और नायब तहसीलदार. यूपी में वैसे ही इतने गांव में तो तहसील लेखपाल होता नहीं है, तो वहाँ हाईवे में कौन सा लेखपाल बैठ के आपको खाना वाना वहाँ पे देगा. So this you know the logistic issue of helping them, you can say on a television, governance through television and Twitters के भाई we'll give food to everyone, we'll do this, we'll give medicine to everyone, हम ट्रक पे किसी को चढ़ने नहीं देंगे. लेकिन ज्यादातर जो लोग निकल के जा रहे हैं उसमें 60-70% ट्रकों पे चल के जा रहे हैं. And you have rightly said, Pramod, there is no concept of social distancing. वो हो ही नहीं सकती. Physical distancing is feasible है ही नहीं. ट्रक में अगर 60 लोग चढ़े हुए हैं, suppose, how can you have a physical distancing in that truck? Once you reach the village, how it is possible? It is not possible. So once we have to understand that those things which are not possible. Once you reach village, then you have to do a concept of quarantine. Now you see, we have seen the conditions of PSC and CSC, especially Uttar Pradesh, I can tell with full authority, it is highly dysfunctional sub-centers from ages, for last 20-30 years. The doctors don't stay there. That is a problem. So basically, once you have dysfunctional kind of PSCs and CSCs on the ground, how do you handle this with this challenge? So basically, again, we come back to this thing कि भाई हम अपना Vedic sciences बजाएं, we will have more immunity, villagers have more immunity, they will have गन्ने का रस पी के भी ठीक रहेंगे, you know, something of that kind. So basically, you have to do immunity sciences. So this challenges of migratory laborers are phenomenal. Now, I'll tell you not the problem, but the solution, because you know we can all handle, we can all say कि ये problem है, वो problem है. The problem in the governance today is that we all analyze problems. We don't come out with solutions, and the good governance means solutions. Now, basically, whosoever is interested to go back home, they should quickly be, because it should have been done the first day. But if it have not been done first day, might be there must be reason behind not doing it. I have no authority to say who took a decision, how they took a decision. But suppose they have not gone, now at least whosoever wants to go, with full fight, full endeavor, full support, 100% cost to the government, 100% cost of food on the platforms, food on the highways, creation, these kind of things, what has been done. For example, Delhi, Yasmin, he was telling, but you know, suppose 300 kilometers from here to Lucknow, from 300, 400 kilometers from there to Balia, these kind of highways, they should have all food packets. Then when you reach to home, quarantine at your local school, then you have to take them from this, and then you have to give them work. Fourth thing is the part of the work. So my only request is, when you reach back home, that you can take 2 programs. I can suggest Narega 2 programs. That one is the Ghoul program, which is means like in your entire areas where all your public roads are being broken, where there are murders every day in the rural India, and rural especially in UP. At this time, you take an opportunity to use this labor workforce for 60 days and give them Narega work and get all ghouls open. Secondly is the taking water to the field. All thing is broken. UP, I know practically 2 lakh kilometers is broken. You know, from the canals, nothing goes to the ground. Now you should take this opportunity, give them 60 days work, and then think of coolly whether 50% of people will come back from there or 50% of people will not come back there. Now you have to really analyze at this level, because you know UP is a very big state, or for that matter, India is a very big country. Some people might not like to go back. You have to analyze, because you don't know the data, who will go back and who will not go back. So you have to do contingency planning for who will go back. Now, if you will go back, then you again come back into the urban areas. Then you again come back to the urban areas. The government's today's notification says that 5% random sampling will be done. Who will come back to Noida in a factory? Now, who will do that 5% sampling? Testing capacity is very low. And in related issue, the last economic issue is that, you know, you have to come out with a scheme of chalo gaon ki or, chalo block ki or. India has got 6,600 blocks. 6,600 blocks. In 6,600 blocks, if we have started, with my own experience, I have taken a block in Mathura district where I have been able to take last 15 days as my passion towards rural development. I thought, let me work out in this crisis a plan where it can be acceptable to the entire rural India. And this was done by Abdul Kalam Sahab in 2004, called Pura, but it failed that time. How can we make it successful? You'll be happy, you know, the last promote that last 20 days itself, we have got a data built up for almost 28,000 families on ground. कि किसके घर में कितनी बकरी है, कितनी गाय है, क्या चीज है. what kind of profession he can do, what kind of vegetables he can grow, what kind of milk he can grow. These data are under preparation, and next 3-4 days we'll be ready with the data, and we'll try to come out with some plan. And there, you know, sometime once we are ready with this data, there the role of experts like you will start, because you know the best of the world in terms of technology. You know the best of the thing you've done in education and in various parts of the world, work in various parts of the world. So there will be a connecting scheme between people like you, people who have in industry, trade, and because they understand to how to do a business. Government doesn't know how to do a business. Basically, that is the kind of model I'd like to suggest.
Yes. Deepakji, I think, you know, I want to come back to some of the points you're making, because I think we must recognize that the challenges of rural India, particularly in states like UP and Bihar, जैसे हम बात कर रहे थे earlier, you know, do we have ventilators at hospitals? Do the doctors know how to use them? Does the nursing staff know how to use them? I mean, these are the realities on the ground. We can perhaps, Jasmine, in Delhi, we can prepare for these, but how do you prepare for them in other parts of the country? And I do want to touch on that, because that's where the major portion of the population live. Apart from that, though, as we go forward, I think the phrase that you have used, Jasmine, is absolutely right. This is living with COVID. This is not a post-COVID world. This is going to be a world where you learn to live with it. So how do you think businesses and the economy must be reopened? Obviously, it's being reopened right now. Is there a danger of a subsequent shutdown as we reopen? Particularly, Deepakji, I'll come to you also on that. As in UP, you open up places. Do we even have the ability to understand and track where these infections are going, where this disease is going? Once we cover those topics, I'm going to move, if you won't mind, into the future. I really want to think about hope. I want to think about optimism all the time. I think we are, as a human race, built on that. We survive based on that. So I want to ask your thoughts about, as we learn to live with this, how do we build out the trust, and how do we build this collective effort that we have seen already of NGOs and individuals and people coming together with government to make a big impact here? I'll come to that later, but let me come back first to the opening up the economy to both of you and ask you for your ideas there.
So, very good question, Pramod. I think this is what we've been thinking very deeply for the last couple of weeks in Delhi. And even if I have to sort of think from the national perspective, I think some sense of perspective in terms of, you know, what is, I mean, at the end of the day, this is, I mean, living with COVID is going to look like living with tuberculosis or living with malaria, and some sense of proportion is extremely important. Yes, this is an infectious disease, but, you know, 4 lakh people die out of tuberculosis every year in India. So have we started completely banning certain sectors or certain sections of our economy? The toll due to HIV, the toll due to malaria is also quite substantial. What we do is we take commonsensical precautions, which individuals as well as government systems and healthcare systems take. And I think if, you know, our ability to open up successfully is going to be how people behaviorally adapt to these kind of, way of life, you know. So social distancing, mask, yes, you know, we all agree that it is difficult. This is something that people, you know, nowhere in the world are they used to. But in India with density, and maybe in some pockets there, it's not going to be possible. But there again, the idea of bubble comes in. So if you're in a family which is, you know, staying in a closed space, then probably it's going to be difficult. But when you are out in the open, everybody, the entire population should follow certain norms. And businesses and workplaces have an extra duty and responsibility. And I would say even the civil society. So if you're an RWA, you should appreciate that opening up the economy is important, but monitor the violation of these essential norms of, you know, wearing masks, social distancing, you know, mandating washing facilities, making it behaviorally easy for people to adapt. So have sanitizers at all points, have mobile wash basins if you need to have it. So the sooner we retool our economy and make our people adapt to these is, I think, going to determine how successfully we open up. How do governments ensure that? I think this is where the leadership and communication comes in, because if the government is able to portray a sense of preparedness, a sense of readiness that, look, at the end of the day, we do have our hospitals, we have our healthcare facilities geared up. That is our duty to ensure that, even after all the precautions, if you fall ill, we will ensure that, emergency medical care is available and people won't die. That rate is the real one that troubles people, but if it becomes like a normal flu, I mean, like malaria, normally you don't panic. You go seek the right healthcare when you fall ill with malaria. Similarly, if our government are able to prepare the systems and then really communicate to people that, look, ensure that you follow these norms and make sure that communication is directly happening from the government to people, I think that will really get, people comfortable with the idea of opening, because right now we still have an air of panic, which is not good.
Unmute now. Sorry, I keep muting myself and then finding out that I'm mute. Don't realize I'm muted. I think these are great points, great suggestions. We'll come back and talk about the future. But the one other thing I would add, though, is, there's a huge fear also in India that we just don't know the scale of the problem. That perhaps in a place like Delhi or NCR, we can absolutely prepare for it, but is it physically possible for us to prepare for it in many other parts of the country? Do we even believe the numbers? Frankly, I don't think you can believe the numbers even in America in terms of infection. I can tell you, I have a lot of friends there. Many of them have been infected. They're not counted as part of the number. They found out because they were close to somebody else who was tested positive. So they got tested and they were told, yes, you have been positive and it's passed. So the numbers could be, and certainly my discussion with doctors, to be honest, we are setting up a COVID-only hospital in Manesar, Haryana. Jasmine, I've worked with you on a variety of getting PPE equipment and food deliveries. And, right now this call center that is running by Genpact to aid patients, all of these things are happening. But I don't know that anybody believes the numbers, right? That do we really know the scale of the problem? And Deepakji, in UP, how can you get your arms around the scale of this problem? It is so humongous. How would you do that?
Pramodji, I will say that that from the national as well as state perspective, that as I'm repeating, our country is huge. The medical support system getting out of NCR depletes so fast that you can't imagine the ground reality. The more you go into the interior areas, it further goes down into a different direction, which probably a person sitting in Delhi or US, he cannot imagine the ground reality. I have seen myself at PSC and CSCs where there was nothing except grass inside and people trees inside. I can tell you that at least there will be a couple of these kinds still existing where people must have not visited them for last 5 years. So that is the ground reality.
If you can just, Deepakji, expand on those acronyms you're using, perhaps some people in the audience won't know what they mean, the PSCs, etc.
I can tell you, like, for example, to the audience, benefit of audience, like a district level, district is divided into tehsils and tehsil is divided into blocks. Usually a district, like UP has got 75 districts. And as our colleague was telling, the India has got almost 732 districts and almost 6,612 blocks in the country and on 7,000 villages. That is a kind of administrative setup in India today. Now, coming back to this, every district has got district hospitals, then a primary health center at the block level and sub-centers at the village level. So that is a kind of mechanism, and it is not only the problem which is there with the human well-being, that is also a problem for the animals. We should not forget about the animal problems, animal diseases which are arising out of the lockdowns which is taking place because not getting treated. So this is a second aspect which we have to keep in mind. We are only been talking about human beings. Forget about the stray dogs, stray cows, this thing and that thing happening. This is itself a big challenge. You have to see, this we have to evolve a mechanism of discussing about animals also. Now,
yes.
So basically, you see in totality, the ground reality is that there is a very weak medical infrastructure. Secondly, the ground reality is that the government machinery is getting tired. I might be repetitive. Thirdly, the COVID, I slightly disagree when Jasmine Saab was telling me that it is almost a COVID, we should treat it as the same as TB or malaria. COVID, the problem is COVID is that you are a human bomb to other person. In malaria, you are not the human bomb to other person. So that is a basic difference. If had it been a situation where you are not a human bomb to other person, then there is no danger. Here, your Padosi is having a problem because of you, or a second neighbor is having a problem because of you. You're going to have the third person having a problem because of you. So these kind of things which are important, which has to be highlighted. But yes, we have to learn to live with it. We have to learn to live with COVID, and we have to learn a situation that how can we work, life and livelihood has to go together. So that is the second thing which I like to say. Both have to go together. Now, coming back to this situation, what are the economic challenges? And you said whether this opening up what will affect, whether it will be positive, can it be reclosed? These things are only conjecture at this stage. We don't know what will happen. Every day will be a great learning experience. You see, in Noida kind of place itself, there is 8 lakh migratory laborers in Noida, which runs almost 11,000 industrial units in Noida. Now, after this 11,000 industrial units, out of 8 lakh laborers, 4 lakh has already gone from here. Now, if you have to restart the small, medium industry, if you speak to their perspective, there is a great economic challenge. There is no demand into the market. There is no demand. That is a large chapter. Whether the industry can sustain by the only money supply through the loans, that is again a situation which is very difficult situation. So it's the entire economy is into the spin. When the economy is into spin, it's a very, very difficult thing. But I think India, भगवान ने हमारी हमेशा मदद की है, तो I think we should be all be hopeful. We should not be pessimistic about it. We have been able to so over centuries we have been able to come out with a lot of difficult problems, and we will be able to come out with it. I think we should be very hopeful and optimistic about everything. But my only suggestion is that this day-to-day monitoring, sooner or later, the day-to-day monitoring from the government level has to go off, because it has to become a way of life. The moment you see only on television since morning till evening only corona, then your mind is in the sense of fear. Every time there is a sense of fear, and so I think the media has to reorient. I think they should be more speaking of larger issues of economy, reorient from only medical part of corona, go to the economic part gradually. So your mindset will change. Today you open in the morning, you see only that so many people
Absolutely.
died. So many people are like there. So many people, every WhatsApp, you see this kind of situation. So there is a threat. But for the rural area, they have not threatened about it. वहाँ तो ये ना भूखे पेट ना भजन को पाला. वो उनकी problem भूख है. And I'm seeing as administrator, it's a great threat. I can tell you in times to come, if the book is not settled properly and there are no work spaces available for immediate and future, then there can be a situation, there will be a lot of crimes coming up in the rural area. You see, people will be doing a lot of lootmar into the rural area. Then they will say कि भाई ये अब क्या करें, पैसे है ही नहीं, क्या करें, अब कैसे अपने family को मरने दें. So you have these kind of challenges are ahead. But I'm sure, I can tell you one thing, that this will take its own, the immediate, जो हमारा immediate future in next 3 weeks का, which is to be watched, because your numbers have gone up to 85,000. Some people it go to 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs, 5 lakhs. The testing will go up. Second part is the medical thing, which I'm saying. I'm not an expert on this, but I was speaking to various doctors, and this panel, I'm sure there must be, in the audience there must be a lot of doctors also. They can debate of it whether the rapid testing kind of thing, which was failed in India initially because of poor kits, where other countries have used it successfully, can we do it very fast in this country? Because RT-PCR is not available into the rural areas. I do a test in Balia, my report will come back after 7 days. मैं 7 दिन वैसे ही डर के मारे मर जाऊंगा रिपोर्ट देने के बाद. बलिया से जब रिपोर्ट चलेगी आते आते उसको जाएगी, कब आएगी कब जाएगी कुछ पता नहीं है. तो unless until there is a decentralized testing situations, this has to be seen only by the doctors. I am not an expert, but my doctor's friend says it is doable. एक बार अगर फेल हो गया कोई चीज, मान लीजिए रैपिड टेस्ट अगर चाइना का खराब निकला, इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि दुनिया में सारे रैपिड टेस्ट खराब है. कोरिया में तो सक्सेसफुल हो गया. You can get Korean kits. Andhra got the kits. But this is the third thing. Second, so this point you raised about the ventilator. Now today I was reading on Twitter, Prime Minister of America says that we'll donate ventilators to India. Now, ventilator is a very peculiar machine. I have seen it on the ground. You know, if you go in an operation theater, every operation theater, the oxygen giving machine is a ventilator. Is a crude kind of ventilator. But ventilator is a machine. It is not like a drip. You can't use a ventilator like a drip where you could just put in a hand of a person and using it. For running a ventilator, you have a doctor and expert. How many doctors and experts are available? Even if we give a ventilator in a village in Balia or Basti Gonda or somewhere, even if in a rural Meerut, I was district magistrate of Meerut, I can challenge none of the doctors in NCR, beyond NCR can run a ventilator. They don't know how to run it. Now, if you don't know how to run it, then what is the need of a ventilator to be there? So basically, these kind of things are there. And last thing I like to sum up is that the sense of fear has to be taken out first. You know, the mortality rate is low at this stage. God has been kind in India. So this has to spread very fast. There is no need to be panicked. I might be having, I came from New Zealand on 2nd of February. I must have had for 10 days. So you never know who is having. हो सकता है आपके पास भी हो सकता है किसी आपको दोस्त से कल लग जाए. There is no need of panicking the entire situation. And I think we have to reorient, reset our mindset, and basically be ready to live with it properly for a long time. An economic model, I'm repeating, I might be sounding repetitive, please, but you know, you are having an audience who are globally well connected. They should come out with, lot of people should come out to support entrepreneurship at the block level. The moment you have 20 good entrepreneurs at block, India will transform in a span of 1 year. I can guarantee it to my experience. You will have milk chilling plants in blocks. You will have vegetable processing plants in blocks. Or, you know, today, if you see for last couple of years, I'll tell you one small example of mobile industry. Mobile industry was, you can please continue.
Let me, Deepakji, I'll go into those a little later. Let me go into some question and answers faster, if I may, because I think we've got only a little bit of time left. We only have 10, 15 minutes left. So let me try and, if I may, get into a faster thing. Looking at the future, there's an enormous level, Jasmine, what we have been able to achieve with the NGOs and the volunteer groups and everybody coming together, not just in Delhi, but every city that I've heard of, is phenomenal. How do we tap into that and build a framework for all of us to do that in the future? Because right now we're responding to a crisis. Is there a way in which we can build those platforms? What I have found remarkable about this has been that the government has facilitated this. They have leveraged this willingness to help and coordinated that effort really well to make it work. One of the issues I've always felt in India is we have, I think, 3 million NGOs. Every little NGO trying to do its own thing, as opposed to a way of bringing them all together so we can leverage their collective capabilities. Last one I'll make, Deepakji, in response to your point, and then I'll come back to you, Jason. You know, to some extent, I think this crisis is overblown by the social media. I don't want to underplay the importance of the crisis, the urgency, the issues around it. It's the biggest crisis of our lives. But you're absolutely right. Waking up every morning, counting every death, counting every infection. I mean, had we done that with heart disease, cancer, malaria, diabetes, everything else, we would be going completely mad at this point in time. And there is a need for us. There is also no other news coming out. There is nothing else to report. There is nothing else happening. When you're in a lockdown, there are no sports, no exhibitions, no retailers, no traffic, no nothing. There is nothing else to report. So media jumps all over it. And I think that's an issue which also is will benefit from the economy opening. Jasmine, let me come back to you. How do you think about opening up the economy? How do you think about building platforms that allow us to really leverage the collective efforts of the citizens of India? To me, that's a big movement, which has been quite amazing to watch.
Yeah. So, Pramod, not so long back, I was on the other side of civil society, a non-profit, a think tank, trying to offer, you know, the government say that, look, we have a certain expertise, you know, we have a certain experience that probably we can add value with. And the problem at most of the time of the government is that they are inaccessible and they are unreceptive. And I think a crisis, hopefully a crisis like this, at least woken up some of the people inside government that, you know, for most challenges, let's accept that government do not have all the answers. Government can take the lead, can set a suitable policy, But if you're not going to really agglomerate all the positive energies of the larger society, be it private sector, be it non-profits, be it well-meaning individuals, you are not going to do as good as you possibly could. In Delhi, from day one, and I think this is part of what, part of it is just sort of what kind of leadership there is. I mean, are you open to ideas, suggestions, taking inputs? And it is both at the executive leadership, the ministers of a government, but also the MLAs, because a lot of the NGOs and civil society operates at a local level. But the second is whether you have structures where the external world can easily plug into. And I think creation of these kinds of systematic platforms, not letting a crisis let you know that, by the way, there are these organizations who work on healthcare data systems, or these organizations who have a very innovative technology model of, running hospitals or whatever it is. But in Delhi, and I can tell you that from experience, is because this commission that I'm a part of, Dialogue and Development Commission, one of the major roles that we play is essentially act as a bridge between the government and the external world, and try and bring in those capacities that we know for sure that actively the government may not have. And it makes it easy then for people to reach out. I would like to believe that our ministers, our CM, everybody is accessible, but there are also platforms and organizations like DDC that actively are working towards bridging these partnerships. And we know this in the example of GenPact, because we had a need to really communicate daily with the patients and really find out what are the additional supports the government can provide. By the way, in Delhi, every COVID positive patient gets a call just to find out how are you doing and do you need anything else beyond what we are providing. And we are collaborating with GenPact on that. And as Dialogue and Development Commission, we bridge that partnership. We made sure that both sides understand each other and we have a working model. So I feel some of these structures needn't be left to intuition. A proper organizations, platforms, and formalize these partnerships, not just in war times, which are where we are right now, but even in peace times, because then we don't have to scurry around the way we are doing right now.
Yeah. Jasmine, how do we open up the economy? With what risks? What does that include? How risky is it? Because, there's articles already about our rates are doubling very quickly. Our numbers are going to go sky high. We should expect that. The fact is we can easily expect this go into lakhs, perhaps multiples of lakhs. With what risks do we open up?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I'll go back to my first point. I don't think there can be, yes, we know that we are an integrated market. Even in India, your supplier could be in UP or your consumer could be in Haryana. But the healthcare system of the state should let the political leadership decide how comfortable you are about opening up. If like Deepak ji is saying that nobody in Meerut might know how to run a ventilator, that is a serious problem. You have to really be worried about opening up in a large way in parts of UP where the healthcare system may not be able to respond immediately. But in Delhi, as I just mentioned, we do have that capacity. We had that earlier, but we have done a lot in the last 50 days to ensure that even if we jump 5 or 6 fold, and we will take precautions that we don't go there, we are able to cope with it. So that is number one. And second is, of course, as I said, on the ground, we will need to really work with the industry. We will need to work with the central government because, there is, when you talk about the economy, the central government has a lot of role to play on this. And, I would, personally like to see the central government working more closely with the states in planning the economy strategy as well, rather than making announcements and decisions, which of course, they have the complete expertise in many of the cases. But we know that local economies function, in probably very different ways all across the India. So just like in healthcare, we saw very good cooperation during the lockdown phase. I would like to see a lot more cooperation between the center and the states, but letting the states decide and really trusting the states that if you do have the healthcare bandwidth to open up the economy and do it sector by sector, region by region, but let states now decide. You cannot have a central strategy on it.
Yes. Deepak, I'm going to come to you. What has been amazing to many people is the fact that in America, a lot of people are protesting against any lockdowns, any rules that are being applied to them, which curtail their freedom, including people like Elon Musk. to what extent is the state overreaching? To what extent is the government overreaching in some of these areas to say, do this and don't do that, we'll lock you down? Because right now, one of the fears is nobody really knows what's going to happen. When can we travel? What can we do? Now, the fact is maybe nobody can know. It's impossible to know that. But to what extent are we overreaching in these areas versus what is actually necessary to do? Just some thoughts. And then in UP and Bihar and many other states, how do you open up the economy? Monsoons are coming, agriculture is coming. How should you open up the economy? How do you utilize all the labor that has gone back there? What can you do with them to be much more productive?
Pramodji, one small suggestion I like to give it to Mr. Jasmine, because he is now the part of the Delhi government team. You know, I was a vice chairman of Meerut Development Authority in 1987. And from years altogether, I've been hearing about NCR plan, National Capital Region plan. And after that, you know, still this entire plan has gone for a sixer for the last 30 years. Now, Delhi government, I will appeal at this time through your, even if some debate should start, that how can you decongest NCR? How can you take people out of NCR? How can, instead of starting the economic activities in Delhi, is basically at this time, it is high time, you see a fire inside old Delhi somewhere. Lot of factories are running inside households in Delhi. So these kind of challenges, I think I am sure Mr. Jasmine will like to debate with his chief minister and various other people, that this is the high time that implementation of NCR counter magnet city and magnet city plans are implemented. Central government have been telling since beginning that we'll shift our offices from here. So that is the thing which has never happened in the history of India. This is a time we should debate. The second point, because NCR plans which is implemented, then majority of the economic activities will go out of the periphery of Delhi, etc., etc. Now there is no second thing I will say, that in isolation nothing can start. If Delhi government says that I start, half of the people come from Noida or Haryana or Ghaziabad, their borders are sealed, no one will go to Delhi, and vice versa. So basically, these entire NCR region, the concept of it is a holistic approach they have to take. Something comes in Haryana government, something comes in Rajasthan government, something will come in UP government. So holistic approach has to be taken for the entire NCR, as far as the NCR region is concerned. Now, the second part you are telling is that opening up an economy in UP. Now,
I'm saying, Deepak ji, if I may, what I'm saying is broadly, where do we open up the economy? You know, agriculture, harvesting, all of those things. What should we do there? To me, the issues in NCR are there, but the fact is, you know, NCR is still a small pocket. The bulk of India isn't here. How should we open this up in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, everywhere else?
So my answer to that, Pramod, is that if you see the people who are infected by now or in a potential infect people, if you isolate these geographical boundaries, you know, some part of Bombay, some part of Ahmedabad, some part of NCR, rest of the India has to be left free in totality, because then the people will realize that these are the only pocket areas. If you are doing a war, look at a war kind of situation. All the sectors, if 3 sectors are important where you're fighting a war with your neighbor, 3 sectors you are pulling your forces. You are not sending all the forces and all the borders of the country. Now, basically, you have to see it from that angle. So make 90% people to live their life properly. Take them out of fear. They should live their life every day. What they have been doing since play football, play cricket, play what they are. So what they have been doing, and give them a background of the medical infrastructure. So if there is a problem, they'll go. If you have a heart attack, you'll go to the hospital yourself. Doctor will take care. So basically, your job is to give them medical augmentation by testing facility and caring facility, and rest the life has to go normal. And isolate those areas which are difficult areas, make a different strategy, and leave it to a decentralized level. Even in a state like Delhi, a collector should be responsible for his, or MLA area should be responsible. Mohalla level should be responsible, not the entire Delhi. We should not speak as Delhi as Delhi. You know, that is the way I'm trying to suggest.
Sure. No, I understand that, but I'm asking a different question also. I'm saying, so we're going to come to the end in a couple of minutes. I want to ask, what does living with COVID look like 1 year from now? What will we do differently? How will our migrant workers behave? Will they come back? Will they trust us? Will they trust employers and governments the way they've been dealt with up till now? But what will India look like as we go forward? And what should it look like? What are the things we will do? What are the things we won't do? Just some predictions for the future, because I want to end with hope and I want to end with optimism, because there is too much fear. I totally agree with you, Deepak. We've got to eliminate that. We are frozen in time. We're almost sitting here frozen in time, and we have to get past that into activity mode. And we will have to deal with the issues as they come up. But let me go back to both of you. Jasmine, maybe I'll come to you first. What does the future look like?
Very, very difficult to predict. But one thing I certainly hope, and I sincerely hope, that the future India is one that prioritizes healthcare expenditure over everything else. This is a point that especially the Delhi government, the AAP government in Delhi has been making over the last 6 years, that healthcare and education is not just the foundation of your society, but also your economy and your future capabilities. Over the last 6 years, we've been consistently in Delhi investing 13% of our budget into health department. The average for all state governments in India is only 5%. And this is almost it's so banal now to say this. For I do not know for how many decades I've been hearing this, that we need to invest more in health. We need to invest more in health. But I think at least I hope this is the last reminder that we need as a country, be it at a state level, be it as a national level, that we need to minimum double our healthcare budgets in the coming year and systematically build our capacities. Everything else is secondary. By now, I mean, we've seen examples where over a week or 10 days, temporary hospitals have been built. And I think knowing that now there is a big reverse migration that is happening, we need these kind of facilities, which are not poor, but they're at least frugal and built quickly. But they do the job, and they should have been built in 30 days. So that is where I think a huge part of our effort needs to go in for now. As far as whether, when will the migrant workers start coming back? I think once there is some sense of equilibrium in our policy, because I mean, you can't blame them, because even right now, nobody knows what is going to happen in a couple of days from now, how much we are going to start the economy, which sectors will start really functioning, which won't. And then it is that, lack of predictability that makes workers, they don't want to pay their rents. They don't know whether their employment is secure. At least वहां पे भूखे तो नहीं मरेंगे. That is the point, and it is as tragic as they say that we'll at least eat, we'll be with our loved ones. So the sooner the governments work together, yes, maybe some sectors of the or industrial activity or economic activity may come to normalcy later. But at least if 70-80% of our economy starts working at a certain level, then I think that will give workers the confidence that if I go back, then I will not face the same scenario, which is I don't have a wage, I don't know how to pay my rent, and I don't have to suffer the indignity of having no food. And I think that's the answer.
But it also brings home very importantly, Jasmine, the point about workers need a safety net. We have none for them. We cannot go on. We must build that safety net along with health.
100%.
You have to have a safety net. Otherwise, you are exposing them. You're leaving them at the mercy. I saw that in skills, by the way. We ran skills businesses. Basically, they said, look, we're at the mercy of everyone once we move out of our villages. At least in the villages, we get looked after. We get some income, and that's why we go back. Deepakji, come to you for some closing thoughts on this. How should governments work together? What does the future look like? What does India look like in this world where we live with COVID? What do our consumers think? How should governments behave from your perspective? How should bureaucrats behave from your perspective? How should we change what we do?
From the bureaucrat's perspective, I'll say that the convergence of resources of various areas, the left hand doesn't know the right hand, so the left hand should join the right hand. That is the greatest change of bureaucracy, because we don't know, means we are 10 segments, verticals, which don't speak to each other. Third thing is that how with the self-reliant India, Swaraj, Gandhian model of economics going on, but I am absolutely hopeful that we have to make economically vibrant entities. The rural India has to be made economically vibrant entity It is not like a vote bank that you come once in 5 years to then and then goodbye. Even a political people have to be equally conscious as they go to the rural booths to collect their votes. Now this is for the time to go back to the rural India and service them, give them a remarkable service at even a booth level, what they do in politics. So I think this is the time that economics has to take over politics for some time. That's extremely important. Otherwise, I am seeing a very, very difficult scenario. If agar bhuka pet jara lamba na khich gaya na, to it will go to a civil war kind of situation. That is ultimate. But I am hopeful. I am still pray that we have a lot of religious beliefs, lot of beliefs in our river Ganga, lot of beliefs in God, that everything will be all right. We should be smiling like you. All of us should be smiling. We should be going back to a very optimistic note that everything should be all right. And especially the people of 60 years plus, the children, which are the great threat force, the people who are having immunity low, the people who are having more medical challenges, they should have more caution. Rest the life has to be free to be attended by the medical support system. And in the meantime, whatever best is possible, I'll tell to Jasmine with a small example that you can increase number of budget by 5 times, but if it is not spent with transparency on the ground, we have got lapses of budget. We get 100 crores, 80 crores lapses, 20 crores lapses. So basically, what you do, we have a tendency of centralized procurement. We do everything, want to do everything at the national level or state level. Why don't you trust your people in the ground? You have to really, the political system has to decentralize everything. You have to take a mask, you have to take a rapid test. ICMR has to get it from China. Why can't every collector get it from anywhere in the world?
Yeah.
If you give him a fund.
Let me end with that. You have been wonderful to have this dialogue. I think it is a very confusing state of affairs. We can't come out with any conclusions. It's a very difficult part. Clearly, optimism, hope, prayer, whatever it is, will play a big role because we have to eliminate the fear with which we work. Decentralization comes through a theme. I actually think in the Delhi government, I must say, I've seen a lot of that happening with the health clinics that they build, the mohalla clinics and the schools, etc. That has been very effective. I think we underestimate the challenges of rural India and in the populous states, what the impact of this could be. We have to be very wary of that. We have a lot of food stored, and yet getting that food to the right places seems to be continually a challenge for many, many years. But with that, I think with the spirit of cooperation and the need for cooperation, even among states, what I'm finding is different states are setting up their own borders. How can that work? Because if supply chains are in different states, you cannot all set up your own borders. For a while, Gurgaon and Haryana said, we won't let anyone in from Delhi. Goa says, we won't let any tourists in. Himachal says, we will only let residents in. Well, fair enough. Then we'll become small countries. We can't have that. And the last point I would just make for everyone's sake is, this is going to start affecting more and more people. I just hope that the panic and the fear that people are creating about somebody who's infected or not, or the healthcare people who are infected, goes away and we learn to live with it. Thank you very, very much for your time and your energy. We're out of time. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Charcha and Aparna and Sanchi, for pulling this together. Jasmine, Deepak,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pramod and Jasmine and the team of Charcha. Thank you very much. God bless you, everyone.
Thank you.